Maces were used predominantly in the Middle East, but nobody really knows the type of maces, so allow me to enlighten. One of the maces that was primarily used and developed over time is something called a Dabbus, which would look something like this. Now, this is a club from Kenya and is used primarily by the Maasai. However, this was something that would have been all too recognizable, taking away all the decorations from what a Dabbus initially looked like. Dabbus look like predominantly a wooden type of club. So in the Abbasid Caliphate, there were two types of maces. There was the amud, which was a solid rod that was used essentially as a very heavy bludgeoning tool to end the blow in one fight. And then there was a Dabbus. The Dabbus came with a number of heads, essentially, that were designed. They're commented as being cucumber heads or knobbed heads, so something similar to this. And they're very non-lethal initially. So we actually have a historical account of somebody getting beaten with multiple people carrying Dabbuses and coming out relatively unscathed, which should show you the type of lethal damage it was. It doesn't seem to have caused much damage and was used as a basic weapon. Now, with that in mind, as the Abbasid Caliphate begins to disintegrate, we see the amud not being used, and its use kind of just diminishes entirely. And the reason for this is because needing the amount of metal at the time, so we're talking about the end of the early medieval period, to create this giant solid rod that's quite heavy of metal is going to require a vast empire and resources, and that simply just doesn't become the case anymore. But the Dabbus itself develops into something completely different. The knobbed head or purely wooden head gets replaced by a metal head, and it seems to develop into a more ergonomic design for being used as a mace. So you begin getting the term lat attached to the mace, which I believe means metal or iron. So it's really interesting to see when things develop and how they develop, and when something as innocuous as this, which doesn't really cause much damage, develops into something which is actually a war weapon. Now, Dabbus itself as a term comes from the Arabic term meaning to strike. And what's particularly interesting about this term is it's actually applied to other percussive weapons like the stick. The stick is specifically mentioned in Furusiya treatises as being a Dabbus. So it basically is used as a catch-all term to mean something that's used particularly for striking or perhaps bludgeoning. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you very much.